Lovely. Many thanks, Alex. Welcome, everyone, and many thanks to you all for being here. We know that the beginning of the season is a really busy time with a seemingly never-ending list of things to do. So we wanted to start you off really with some helpful reminders and how-tos to get you off on the right foot, really, to try and ensure that it's a positive season for children and adults alike. I think from the booking information I've seen, we've got a variety of people on this webinar, which is great to see. I'm really pleased when club safeguarding officers are supported by other club members and committee members and constituent body officials. So thank you for all being here. It really helps us reinforce that safeguarding is everyone's responsibility. I won't repeat Alex's helpful housekeeping reminders, but just to emphasise really that if you do have questions that we don't have chance to answer today, we will be putting together an FAQ document that we'll email out to you. And you also might want to take a note of our email there at the bottom of the screen, safeguarding@rfu.com. Please, you are always welcome to drop us an email if you have any questions or want to check things out. We would absolutely prefer that we have early contact rather than late contact, so always feel that you can do that. I might start off with introductions for everybody else, if that's okay. So I'm Viv Rimmer, as Alex said, Head of Safeguarding for the RFU, and I'm joined by Kath, Jamie and Chris. And I'm going to ask, Kath, do you want to come off of mute and introduce yourself? And then we'll go to Chris and Jamie too.
Good evening all. My name's Kath Bennett. I'm the Safeguarding Case Manager here at the RFU. So I'm responsible for overseeing the work of the case officers and overseeing all investigations and management of concerns and allegations. Thank you.
Thanks, Kath. Chris?
Yeah, hi. Good evening, everybody. Hope you enjoy this evening. So I'm Chris Rawlings. I'm the RFU Safeguarding Compliance Officer. So potentially emailed and dealt with a number of you previously in relation to DBS checks. So this evening I want to cover a section on effective recruitment and also have a look at our safeguarding training programme for the season ahead.
Thanks, Chris. And last but definitely not least, Jamie.
Yeah, hi, I'm Jamie McDermott. So I am the Safeguarding Quality Assurance and Development Officer, and my role is around the proactive side of safeguarding. So everything to do with policy, procedures, training, all that side of things.
Lovely, many thanks, Jamie. So we've taken on board, I guess, when we were thinking around what we wanted to cover this evening, we've taken on board, I guess, the questions that we frequently get asked and have designed the webinar really around them. So we would hope to cover all of the areas that you want to, but we haven't got a crystal ball, so we will absolutely try to incorporate your questions into this webinar too. So the items that we've got on the agenda this evening, so Jamie's going to talk us through annual safeguarding audits. Chris will take us through all things DBS and safer recruitment. Perhaps not all things, Chris, you might direct people to some of your other webinars too. The Kath will move on to cover the changes that we've made in relation to Regulation 21 this season. And then Chris is clearly a sucker for punishment because he will be back then to discuss training before I finish off with a bit of a reminder about culture. So I'm going to keep an eye on the questions that come through in the Q&As, and if they can be easily answered by one of the team, then I'll read them out after they've delivered their section. Otherwise, they will be sent around, so we will take all of the questions. And I'm conscious with so many people on, I think we've got almost 160 on at the moment, so that things might move quite quickly. So please don't be worried if we don't get to your question. We will make sure that we take those on board and send you something through for the beginning of next week, if that's okay. So I hope that all makes sense. And if I can forward through my screen, I'm going to pass over to Jamie, if that's okay, who's going to take you through the annual safeguarding audit.
Yeah, hi everyone. So in this section, I'm going to speak about the club safeguarding audit. This actually went live this season, so the 2024 to 2025 season on the 1st of July. I'm going to cover why it's important, what we do with the submissions, so you understand it's not just you submit something and it goes into the ether. I want you to understand exactly what we do with it. and also to reflect on the audit tool and how it can, by being thorough in your completion, you can be in the best position going forward and use it as a tool to help you plan. So I realise that there's going to be people on the call, some of whom may have completed the audit numerous times over the last few years. Some people it may be the first time, might be your first rodeo, and some people might be wondering exactly why it needs to be done. So hopefully I cover all bases on this, but I thought it'd be useful just to go as a sort of what, how, where, why we ask, to sort of structure it. So what is the club safeguarding audit? So the audit is mandatory under Regulation 21, so the safeguarding regulation, and it's mandatory for any club that has age grade activity, but also any adult club who wishes to have 17-year-olds playing up. So you'd be familiar with that within the approval process for Regulation 15. At the start of the season, it's only open to clubs that we recognise as having age grade activity. So what I would say is that if you're on the call and you think your club's been missed, if you can email us at safeguarding@rfu.com, and the reason being that it hasn't appeared on your GMS site, we can definitely add you to that. So yeah, it's opened up to age grades clubs we recognise having age grade activity, but it's also open to mandatory for, like I said, the adult only clubs with 17-year-olds playing up. As an adult only club with 17-year-olds playing up, you may have had it open to you last season, but not this season. That's because, like I said before, it's only opened automatically for clubs that we recognise as having age grade activity. So every season you'll have to request for it to be added. So if you can again email us at safeguarding@rfu.com, and the reason that you're an adult only club with 17-year-olds playing up or wishing to have that approval, we can add it and we can separate those two different aspects. But again, the what is, so it's a self-audit tool for clubs to be able to collectively think about and reflect on their safeguarding practices, and it's 16 questions long, but 17 if you've got third-party activities. So the how and the where. So the audit can be completed by the club safeguarding officer or another officer with at least level 2 permissions on GMS. It's found and accessed on the questionnaire tab, which is located in the organisation profile module of your GMS. There are also guides within the community rugby help portal, and if you just do a search on search engine, you'll be able to find that audit information as well. But if there are any questions around trying to access or you can't find it, please contact us and we'll put you in touch with those who can provide support. So the when, so again, for the 2024 to 25 season, open on the 1st of July as stated, and the main thing is that the deadline for those clubs offering age grade activity is the 25th of October this year. What we'd say is does seem quite a long way away, but we advise not waiting until the last minute to submit, because you'll get a barrage of emails from Viv and I and your CB safeguarding managers across the country prompting you to complete. So as this is all about planning for the season ahead, it's a really good opportunity, if you haven't done so already, to use that as a reflection of what where the current state your club is at with safeguarding, and what you can do to plan for going forward this season. What I would say is the exception to that date is for adult only clubs with 17-year-olds playing up. That can be requested at any point in the season, because obviously you'll get birthdays at different points in the season. So there's just a difference there. And finally, moving on to the why. So the why is the key bit for us. Like I said at the start, it's not something that we just want you to do as a compliance piece or a tick box and think it goes into the ether. There is, reasoning behind this. And I'll go into more details on how we utilize this after. But essentially, we put the audit in place for clubs to be able to reflect on and take stock of their safeguarding procedures and practices, and the RFU to be able to monitor this and guide them with CB safeguarding managers around the key areas of safeguarding that they should be looking at. So for the RFU safeguarding team, CB safeguarding managers working clubs, it is a way to monitor age grade compliance, assess trends, and target clubs that may need support. So we're not cracking the whip with this audit. It's not a pass and fail. We want you to be as honest as possible. So when we look at the submissions, we can look at which clubs may need support and utilize either our services or the CB safeguarding manager to help those clubs. We as a safeguarding team, the RFU, use it to understand the safeguarding landscape across the game. And what we say is in our day-to-day function, where a concern might be raised, one of the first things that we will do is look at the audit to see how safeguarding fares in the responses that are provided. So it's vital that the responses that are given are honest. We're not trying to catch you out. It's a supportive measure. Moving on to using the self-audit as to your advantage. With the questions that are within the audit, there are, like I said, 16 or 17, depending on if you have third-party activities, but they range around topics such as policy, DBS checks, and things like that. And it's a great opportunity to be able to speak with your committee or key officers within your club to work collaboratively on the submission. It doesn't have to just be, oh, this is a safeguarding audit, the safeguarding officer completes it. It's a really good opportunity to put it in front of your committee and put, safeguarding on the map in your club. Based on what I've been talking about here about the importance of answering honestly, and really getting across to everyone in your club that safeguarding is everyone's responsibility, and also that those in the committee need to understand what you are submitting if it is yourself that is doing so. We have changed a few questions in the some of the questions within the audit very slightly. There is one difference this year around which we've added in around the update service, but we have tried to flesh out those questions a bit so it's a supportive. It's more supportive when you're going through and answering those questions. So it less feels like a tick box. And when you're going through those questions, you'll see that there's much more support and links to various points within the question. So you can really reflect on what we're asking you. And again, take it to the committee and take it to people you're working with, the volunteers, and to understand where the club is with safeguarding. For those that have submitted already, it might be a good opportunity if you've done that in isolation to just speak with relevant people in your committee around what you've submitted and use it as a bit of a plan for this season. And finally, what we've learned from last season. So there's been a trend over the last few years where one of the questions is around whether clubs utilise the application form for volunteers, and that's steadily increased over the last few years, like I said. So that's one example of where we have seen a trend of that increasing, and that is directly through us pushing it through things like Chris's DBS webinar that we did earlier in the year, to increase sort of that visibility. Again, last year we found that there was a quarter of clubs that didn't have an assistant, so we reached out to those clubs through CB safeguarding managers and understand what could be done to try and support those CSOs and whether they needed someone to support them in an assistant role. And they have been really useful over last season to support CB safeguarding managers in their deep dive process. So any club that has a CB safeguarding manager undertake a deep dive review where they'll come and meet the club. The first thing that they will do is look over the answers and submitted in this audit and use it as a basis for undertaking that review and understanding where the club is at the start. What Viv and I did at the conclusion of last year's submissions was also understand where clubs might feel they aren't supported and speak with those clubs. So we reached out to all those clubs to understand how the RFU and CBs could support those clubs for safeguarding and understand how we can support the game more widely. Like I said, the deadline is the 25th of October. It feels like quite a way away, but I would, if you haven't looked already on your questionnaire to have on GMS, I would recommend you doing so and using it as a plan to help you effectively plan for this season. If you've got any questions about the audit, please contact us at the safeguarding email address, safeguarding@rfu.com, or reach out to your CB safeguarding manager. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you, Jamie. And that's really helpful. And I'd just like to emphasise that we're here to help with the audit, and getting it completed early, I guess, is the key to not being bombarded by emails from myself or from Jamie in the run up to the deadline. And it really isn't a pass or fail. So while some responses might mean a follow-up from the safeguarding team or from your CB safeguarding manager, that's not a telling off. It's a way of us really supporting you and your clubs. A couple of questions that have come up in the Q&A section. Rose asks if her club needs to complete the audit if they only have members aged 18 plus. No, you don't need to. It's not mandatory, Rose. You can. So you could ask for the audit to be open to you and just do the safeguarding declaration. But there is no obligation for you to do so. So the audit is automatically opened for those clubs that GMS recognises offer age grade activity. For clubs who wish to have 17-year-olds play up in the adult game, it's opened up on request. So you send an email to safeguarding@rfu.com and we will facilitate that for you. But for adult-only clubs who don't wish to have 17-year-olds playing up, there is no compulsion for you to complete the safeguarding audit. Philip asks whether or not we've got a guide to using GMS and accessing the audit function. Yes, there is. Apologies, we were hoping to do a slide that would kind of show you that. When we put the question and answers together, we will include the link to that. So it's a live link on the screen here, but obviously you can't access that, so apologies. Yes, there is an audit guide, or there is a guide to opening the audit, and in relation to completing it, there's a how-to guide for that as well. And not related to audits, but another question that I'm just going to answer now, if that's okay. So Malcolm asks whether or not it's true that if you coach, you can't be a CSO, so a club safeguarding officer. So Malcolm, whilst we would suggest in an ideal world, the club safeguarding officer is a standalone role, in the real world, we realise that lots of people have different roles within clubs. The reason that we suggest it's a standalone role is really so there's no conflict of interest, and so that those that are perhaps involved in the age group that you coach don't feel that you being a coach might be a barrier to them raising an issue or concern. For clubs where you've got an individual, whatever that position is, who is taking on the safeguarding role in addition to another, we would suggest that it's really important that your club know if the club safeguarding officer isn't the right person, or they might find it a little bit difficult to raise a concern with that individual, that there are alternatives available. So a little bit like a school. In a school, you'll have a safeguarding lead and a lead officer in relation to safeguarding, but actually there'll be other people within a school that somebody could raise a concern with. And that's what we'd really like you to promote within our club too. So thanks again, Jamie, that's really helpful. I'm going to pass over now to everyone's best friend when it comes to recruitment compliance. Chris, over to you.
Oh, what an intro, Viv. Thanks very much. Made my day. I'll go home now. Right, yes, so good evening once again, everybody. What I want to do is just have a brief discussion about effective recruitment or safer recruitment within your clubs, because obviously we're approaching September. A lot of clubs will start going back now with age grade rugby, training sessions. Fixtures have come thick and fast, and new volunteers and new children and new players coming through your doors, and hopefully we get healthy numbers on that front. But with that does come some cause for concern and some sort of reflective thinking that needs to be taken place. So that's where safer recruitment comes in, and ensuring that those people that are wishing to engage in the children's workforce, whether it be coaching, team managers, assisting, parent helpers, etc., are suitable to do so, and are acting as appropriate role models to the children under their care or supervision. So as you see on the slide there, I think I might do this backwards, although just to be awkward. So if we start on safer recruitment processes and vetting techniques. So as I said a second ago, it's a busy time of year. And I understand on this call, we've got people from a variety of experiences, a variety of roles within rugby. So whether that be the safeguarding officer, assistants, on secretaries, or just genuine curious individuals that are interested in safeguarding processes within rugby. So with being a busy time of year, probably a lot of work for one person as a safeguarding officer to take on would be that sort of recruitment process and those DBS checks. So what we would definitely recommend, and Jamie and Viv have mentioned it already tonight, so I'll just echo that, is where possible, and we are completely aware that volunteers are hard to find in a number of situations, but where possible, if you can look to have a safeguarding team within your clubs and organisations, so it's not all falling on one individual, that is definitely pushing towards best practice. It also helps with contingency planning. So if you decided you, as a lead safeguarding officer, you were going to step down, someone or other people can take over the role. There's no gap, a void, as it were, with regards to safeguarding reporting. It also gives you that support network, so you can share the workload. So you're not having to suddenly in September do 100 DBS checks and chase people for bringing their ID documents, etc. together. You've got a group of people, whether they 2 or 3, or depending on the size of your club, 4 or 5, that can sort of sit down together and really drive that compliance piece through. And also, as a safeguarding officer, you may be close to somebody that an allegation's made against. So it opens up that transparency there, that you can hand over any sort of fact-finding or concerns reporting, which I'm sure Kath will come on to in a bit, and to someone else that, as I say, it's a transparent process and it's not all falling on you and there's no conflict of interest there. So in relation to that safe recruitment on a wider spectrum, yeah, you are going to have a lot of people that are coming into clubs, whether that be people that have been involved in rugby previously, or brand new people, and they've got a 5 or 6 year old child that's coming into rugby for the very first time to experience the joys of our wonderful sport. I think it's about sort of giving them an understanding of what would be expected of them in relation to the sort of the rugby environment, what any role and responsibility that they're going to be looking to undertake clearly emphasises. Within our In Touch course, which I'll cover the training courses later, we go into a lot more detail about safer recruitment, so I won't go on too much of a deep dive on this. So it's definitely worth anyone that hasn't done that In Touch course before, or hasn't done it recently, booking onto that. Again, I'll come on to that on the next section that I cover. But sort of monitoring a volunteer for a period of time would be good practice. So not jumping them straight into lead coach of the under sixes. Maybe you have established coaches within your setup that lead that, and then new volunteers can come in a supervised capacity, or parent helpers in the club or the lead coaches can monitor them to see how they're behaving and the sort of behaviours that they're demonstrating, before you make that sort of final decision about whether you want them to take on a main role within your club. Again, and speaking to that individual, understanding what, again, their motivation is to work involved in your rugby club or your organisation, and also finding out whether they've had previous involvement in rugby before. So have they come from a rugby club down the road? If so, best practice would be to contact their safeguarding officer or someone at that club to understand whether they've left under a grey cloud, whether there are any safeguarding concerns, and they're not just trying to skirt under the carpet and everything like that. So these are all good practices to put in place. I would definitely recommend attending our safeguarding training, the In Touch course, that specifically covers this in a lot more detail to get a lot more information, sort of processes can be put in place. But one big part of that safe recruitment process, obviously, is the glamorous world of the DBS checks, so the disclosure and barring service checks. In order to carry out those DBS checks or vet the individuals that are going to want to work with your children, you'll need to have access to our specific DBS system. So I appreciate some of you on this system may already have access to that, and I don't want to preach to converted on this, but again, there's new people on this webinar that may not be aware of it. So if you want to carry out DBS checks for your clubs, or you've just been appointed a safeguarding officer or safeguarding assistant, you'll need to have that safeguarding officer role or safeguarding assistant role applied to your GMS record, and also be provided with level 4 permissions or higher, depending on what other access to data you need for any other roles you may hold in the club. Once that's done, you need to contact us at the RFU. So by all means, contact us at the safeguarding@rfu.com email address. That will be sent through to the relevant person, i.e. myself. But there's also a dedicated email account if you want to bypass that, which is dbseap@rfu.com. So don't worry about writing that down. That will be included in any material that we send out post webinar. But that's a specific email account that we're monitoring in relation specifically to DBS applications, any issues with our DBS application process in our system. So once you've got access to that, then you can carrying out the application process. Again, when you're set up on that, I would be sending you out a clear step-by-step guide, FAQ document, and also I carried out a DBS webinar earlier this year in March, which again will be signposting to you with any follow-up material, and anyone watching this on YouTube after this piece on the club support YouTube channel, you should be able to find the webinar link on there. But that's definitely something worth looking at if you want a lot more information about DBS checks and eligibility. But in a nutshell, in order to do a DBS check on someone, they have to be carrying out a regulated activity, which is defined as caring, supervising, educating or training children or vulnerable adults, depending on the role, on a frequent basis. Once you've established that there's an eligibility for them to have a DBS check, you make the application through our DBS system. The application is then submitted, goes to the disclosure and barring service electronically, the application is carried out, and then it's sent back to us with a result, so whether that contains information or not. So if it contains no information, it's going to go straight to GMS and update their RFU ID with a current DBS status. If there's any information on it, we'll manage our DBS case management process, which essentially writes to the person, obtains their copy of their DBS disclosure, a written representation surrounding any information that's on that certificate, and any other relevant information. From there, we'll manage those on a case-by-case basis. We may require further information from yourselves at the club in the form of a reference to meet with a person, view their disclosure and have a discussion about suitability, or gain a bit more information about any offence or potential risk there. Again, we're not asking you to become police detectives on that front, but we would just like the club's sort of input in any sort of recruitment process there for the RMG to then take, the RFU's dedicated referral management group to take that forward and make another final determination of suitability. When that process has been completed, we'll either approve the application and then GMS will be updated in the club and the applicant themselves will be notified in writing of that outcome, or we will unfortunately have to reject them if their risk is too high or the offence is too serious and potentially more recent. And then again, on that front, we would update GMS and we would notify yourselves as the clubs or the organisations and the applicant accordingly. Again, that they're all managed on a case-by-case basis. So that's how the DBS process works in a nutshell. What I would say is it's key that accurate data and timely checks are, timely completion on those DBS checks. So ensuring that full names are used, not Bobby or Johnny or something like that, if their full name's Robert or Jonathan in those two examples. Key, so the application needs to be made in their full legal name. There's a lot of times where the GMS record is in an abbreviated name, which is understandable. People may want to be known by a certain name, but it's key that when the actual DBS application, which is a legal requirement, the legal current name is included, along with full address history, previous names, and all the other information that's requested on there on the system itself. And again, timely completion of those checks is key, because we're coming to a busy time of the year, whether that be in sport and also in education, with schools going back, and a lot of teachers are requiring DBS checks again. So September, October, November is a peak period for the disclosure and barring service in their processing routes. So if we're leaving DBS checks too long, I mean, Regulation 21 says they have to complete the DBS check within 4 weeks of taking on that role. We're giving them a chance to see whether it's for them, and you've made that determination that they're someone you want engaged in your workforce, and then the DBS has to be completed. That doesn't mean you start an application, the applicant sits on it for 3 weeks, then they submit it, and then before we know it, it's December before the actual application is completed. We'd require the application itself to be submitted, so that's ID checks and the applicant's submission all completed in a timely fashion. Again, as I said a second ago, it's a busy time of year, so the DBS can take quite a long time for applications to go through. I mean, we've had certain police forces around the country that have taken a number of months for applications to go through. So it's just being aware of that, just make sure they're done in a timely manner. The earliest we could chase up an application for anyone that you submit, or one that is in progress already maybe, is if the local police force, which is the final stage of an application, have had it over 60 days. So we're talking 2 months at the very earliest that we can escalate an application, and even then sometimes it doesn't result in the DBS certificate being issued. So again, just to harp on that, making sure that the data is submitted accurately, so there's no queries from the DBS in relation to content, and that they're completed as soon as possible, so that we're not leaving applicants halfway through a season or longer without DBS clearance in place. I briefly mentioned a second ago about how you get access to our DBS system. If you have an account on our system and it's unused for a period of time, I believe it's 6 months, your account will automatically lock due to data protection to stop people accessing systems if they're potentially no longer involved. Ideally, we'd want the club to notify us proactively if somebody's stepped down as a safeguarding officer or assistant, so we can revoke their account. But this is a safeguard that's in place to make sure that after a period of time that happens anyway. So that automatically happens from the system. In order to get that lock removed, you'll need to contact us at the RFU, again, by those 2 email addresses, RFU DBS one, which is dbseap@rfu.com, or the safeguarding@rfu.com email address, and then we can lift that suspension or that lock and then send you a password reset to regain access to it. And then finally on this section, I want to talk about the DBS update service. This is something that's rumbled on for 12 or so years now, and the RFU have been unable to really take advantage of because of our IT systems and the way that it's managed. But since August 23, so a year ago, we started an update service linked to our DBS system, which ultimately means when an applicant makes the DBS application and the results issued, they're automatically generated an email from our DBS system to log into their DBS application, view a message which is basically advising them that they can subscribe to the DBS update service, and then subscribe to it. What that ultimately means is if they do that and then provide consent to the RFU to carry out annual status checks, and they remain in the same workforce and none of their data changes, i.e. they don't change their name through marriage or whatever it may be, that if there's no further criminal information, so they never commit an offence again if they have previous offences, or they never commit a criminal offence, we'll be able to carry out status checks and remove the need for them to carry out a new DBS check every 3 years, which is the current process as per Regulation 21. So it's definitely worth selling that to volunteers. It's a free of charge service for volunteers. If you're in a paid role, it's £13 annually, which works out at £39, if my maths is correct, over a 3-year period, and a new DBS check for a paid role is £38. So it's essentially the same price, but saving you having to go through the bureaucracy of having to provide IDs, etc. every 3 years. So definitely something that we'd be pushing out to clubs as much as possible and selling the benefits on. And if you can do that with all your volunteers, and if they get any of those messages, to reassure them that it's not spam, it's something that they should really take advantage of. And then in a year's time, we'll be contacting them again just to confirm that that data is still accurate, and to obtain that consent to carry out those status checks. We're at that process now because I said we launched it a year ago. So I'm in that process now of those people that had DBS checks issued in August last year to be able to get those status checks carried out. The way GMS is going to display that is currently work in development. We're working with the GMS development team. They've spent a lot of time over the summer getting the adult player registrations processes up to speed. It's definitely on their agenda, so we'll be able to communicate more information on how GMS will display those people that have subscribed to the update service and how it will show as soon as we've been able to sit down with them and sort of understand how they can display it. But it's definitely something, just to really summarize on the update service, that we'd be pushing out to the game and recommending for a lot of reasons. As I say, it saves people having that bureaucracy of having to keep doing DBS checks. It gives us a more frequent status check on those people to make sure that any new criminal information is known to us. And I should just add to that, I maybe missed it a second ago, if a status check comes back and there's a status change on their DBS result and there is new information on it, we would, in those situations, need them to carry out a new DBS application so that we can get the most up-to-date information in order to carry out that risk assessment in relation to safer recruitment. Other than that, I think that's sort of covered everything in relation to effective recruitment. As I said a second ago, a lot more information is included in our In Touch course, which I'll cover in the safeguarding training. But other than that, thank you very much. I don't know if there's any questions that have come up that are pertinent, Viv, or we can feed back at another time.
Thanks, Chris. We've had lots of questions actually, and I think we won't have time. I'm really conscious of the time, and we've still got quite a lot to cover. So we will take all of your questions away. Just a couple that I'm just going to answer really quickly. Somebody asked, I think John asked about when renewing a DBS, whether or not you needed to ask for a volunteer form to be resubmitted as well. No, you don't. And also, we're not expecting, for those of you that maybe didn't use volunteer application form as part of your recruitment process before, to go and retrospectively ask for those forms to be completed. Drawing a line under the stand and starting as you mean to go on from now on is definitely the way to go. Several questions about DBS checks, particularly for committee members. We can't have a blanket approach, so you will have some committee members who will be maybe responsible for supervision of coaching, maybe do some coaching or some other regulated activity themselves. Being a part of a committee in a rugby club does not currently meet the criteria, and it's not the RFU's criteria. This is the government criteria in relation to who is required to have a DBS. So those people that supervise those, or have responsibility for supervision of those who are themselves in regulated activity, can be included in regulated activity themselves, but there isn't a blanket approach, I'm afraid. Somebody else asked about team captains, for example, in adult teams where we've got 17-year-olds playing up. Sometimes they could be considered to be in regulated activity, particularly if that team captain has taking a coaching role, because perhaps for some, we know in some adult teams there aren't formal coaches and players are coaching themselves, and so that might meet the threshold for regulated activity. Seek advice from us. We're always more than happy if you pop us an email to have a conversation with you around the duties that somebody is undertaking to establish whether or not they are likely to be viewed as being in regulated activity. Thank you. I'd recommend having a look at Chris's webinar, absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to pass on to Kath now, if that's okay, who's going to talk us through kind of the regulatory changes this season.
Hi, good evening all. So 2 points really. Firstly, a reminder that all safeguarding matters must be referred through to the RFU safeguarding team. Our email address will be at the end of this webinar, but safeguarding@rfu.com. Referred to us without delay. This gives us an opportunity to assess the information and provide early support for the club, initial advice, and also potentially straight away for the RFU to start managing that case, because we can see the risk or we need to make referrals to other agencies. We have had a couple of incidents last season where there was a significant delay in clubs reporting safeguarding matters to us. And also we must remind you that if you receive contact from another agency, for example, the police or the local authority designated officer, contact must be made with us as well by yourselves. We cannot guarantee that the police or LADO will contact us direct. So it's just that reminder. If you've got any queries about something that's occurred at your club or any information that you've received, you're not quite sure what to do with, then drop us a line for some initial advice and support. One of the team will get back to you. So please don't hesitate to do that. So in relation to Regulation 21, Regulation 21 is reviewed and updated every year. So if going into the new season, you're referring to regulations that were published last year, please ignore that. Please look at the England Rugby website, new website, and seek Regulation 21. That is the current one, and that is live at the moment. Next slide, Viv, please. So just going to run through some changes that are published this year. First one, this is Jamie alluded to the GMS audit. The date for submission of audits varies each year. I think the first year that we used the audits, it was end of December. We've obviously brought that forward because we're opening the audit early. So please check that date. It's in regulation, so it's the 25th of October. The next one, 21.18. In order to investigate a referral, the RFU are able to request a club, a person or a player to provide information or attend a meeting. We now also make reference to safeguarding matters involving adults. This provides clarity for clubs and individuals that the safeguarding team may request information to assess potential adult safeguarding concerns. So, you know, that's matters that have occurred between adults. We may need to assess that to see whether there's an adult at risk there, which fulfills our obligations under the Care Act, or there's other elements that we need to consider. So that is in a regulation. If the RFU request information from clubs or an individual, it's mandated that they must comply. Regulation 21.2.2 in reference to DBS. Chris made mention of this, is that following a DBS application. Now that application is that the person has submitted all their information, press the button, and that DBS application is in the process of being countersigned by the RFU and then sent off to the DBS for processing. This isn't a matter of the CSO requesting the ID of the person. This is an application where it is active and live. And during that application, the person may volunteer or work whilst they are supervised at all times. And when we talk about supervision in this regard, we're talking about active supervision. So they're in the line and sight of another person who has a valid DBS. Okay, thanks, Viv. So we now have again a regulation in relation to DBS. So 21.2.3. So there are occasions when information will be disclosed on a DBS. I'm sure many of you on this call have been the CSO at the end of that process. And until the RFU have had sight of their DBS and assessed the information on it, then that person must not engage in unsupervised regulated activity. So you, as the CSO, will receive a notification that there's information on a subject's DBS. Chris Rawlins starts the DBS case management process. We need to see what the DBS says so we can assess the risk. This is clear clarification for the game because although some of these DBSs may have been cleared previously, we do not know what the content is on a certificate until it's been provided to us. And we allow people to continue in a supervised role because we don't wish to ask those who've previously been cleared and provided the information to step away, because we do understand it will have a significant impact on clubs. However, we do need to balance that with ensuring that those working with children or adults at risk do not have information on their certificate that could cause us concern. Next one, 21.2.4. This is in relation to the online e-safeguarding awareness, the e-learning. This is mandatory to be completed prior to a DBS and has been for a few seasons, but we need to ensure that the course is completed in the same season as a DBS application. So if somebody is submitting a DBS application this week and they completed the e-learning in June, then that's not valid. The change has been made to resolve this ambiguity regarding the time frame of the online course completion. So it reflects that the course attendance for the online resets at the end of every season. So please be mindful of that. So 21.2.8, this supplements regulation prior to that, 21.2.7. So we are now saying that should an individual be arrested or be under investigation for any offence, including but not limited to harm to a child, sexual assault or physical violence towards any person, the RFU safeguarding team must be informed. Now, it's a new regulation to complement the regulation that says we must be informed if any person is cautioned or convicted. And the reason behind this is that we are aware that police investigations or other investigations by other agencies can take some time, months, years to conclude. So whilst an investigation may not lead to the RFU taking action, it provides us with an opportunity to fulfill our obligations not only to protect children and adults within your club, but also to assess whether any measures or additional measures are required to ensure that those investigated are not subject to further allegations. It also gives us an opportunity to provide support to you as a club in how to manage that. You as a club must not be afraid to inform us about arrests or investigations. We are aware that on occasions clubs are cautious about contacting the RFU and providing that information because matters haven't been proven in court, and this clarification has been requested by the game, so to speak, in order that the information sharing with us is permitted. So that is a quick rundown of the changes in regulations. Please, when this webinar is released and on the Club Support YouTube channel, have a look at this again alongside regulations sat beside you. So, and if you do have any further questions about the changes in regulations or any part of Regulation 21, then please do email us. Thank you, Viv.
Lovely, thanks, Kath. And again, just to reiterate for all of the things that we're talking about this evening, it is always okay to drop us an email and one of us can pick up the phone or pop something in writing to you to answer questions. Thank you. Chris is just going to spend a couple of minutes, if that's okay, just talking around safeguarding training and how to access that, particularly thinking around some of the courses that we provide. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, no problem. I think Kath's covered the safeguarding awareness course. You should be aware of that, so I won't go into detail on that. It's on the GMS course finder and it's a requirement prior to any DBS application within that same rugby season. There's a useful tool on your GMS membership, or your GMS club profile in identifying who has what training in relation to safeguarding. So if you access your GMS site, so your club or your organization, go to organizations profile, and then there's a report function, and within there you'll be able to bring up a list of all of the safeguarding training. Additionally, there's also other useful reports, specifically the club DBS reports, so you can monitor your DBS checks and when they're due to expire, etc. So a useful tool there. I won't go into a lot of detail because I'm conscious of the time, and also that there's a link in this presentation that we will be able to access post-webinar that's on there. So we covered the safeguarding awareness. So other than that, we have 2 safeguarding training programs that we run. So we've got a face-to-face course, which is a 3-hour training course called Play It Safe. That is managed or booked in by yourselves at your club. So what you would do is you would access the tutor map, which is available on the Safeguarding Children pages of the Our England Rugby website. Locate a tutor within the sort of local region to your area, make contact with them and arrange some suitable dates that you'd be able to host a Play It Safe course. We usually ask for a 6-week lead-in on dates to make sure that the tutor's availability, and then it gets time for our training team to get it on the GMS course finder and people to book on, etc. Again, and that tutor will take care of a lot of the admin for you, so contact our area training team to get it set up. If you aren't able to host those courses, but you have requirement for your members to attend it, again, you can use the GMS course finder, enter your details, a local area, or search for Play It Safe, and it'll bring up a list of the Play It Safe courses in the area for you to book onto. I believe we have had a glitch on the GMS system where there's 2 safeguarding options on the search. So I think that's being resolved, but just make sure if that is the case that you select both the safeguarding options to make sure you bring back all of the results in order to find the Play It Safe courses that are local to you and book onto. And the In Touch course, I mentioned it earlier, that's one specifically aimed at safeguarding officers or those in charge of sort of implementing safeguarding processes within your club or organisation. That's run by ourselves, the RFU safeguarding team, virtually, so usually via Microsoft Teams. Again, that's located on the GMS course finder. We tend to run them at least during the season quite regularly, but it's a case of keeping an eye on that, usually on a Wednesday evening. But we do offer other alternatives potentially during the daytime for people that can't make those Wednesday nights. So we have a couple of courses I'd just like to highlight to you that we still got spaces on for dates, if you want to have any of them that are suitable for you. Wednesday the 21st of August, so that's next Wednesday. Wednesday the 4th of September, Thursday the 26th of September, Wednesday the 9th of October, and Thursday the 24th of October. They're live courses that are currently on the GMS course finder for you to book onto. It's a 2.5-hour course, I say run virtually by the RFU safeguarding team, free of charge. At the In Touch course, the Play It Safe course, I believe, costs a nominal fee of £10, I believe. But the In Touch course is run usually from 7 until 9:30 at night on the Wednesday night. But again, there's a lot more information if you go to the course finder or the Safeguarding Children pages of the England Rugby website. It goes into a lot more detail about the training, but it's definitely worth making sure that you're aware of that and trying to push that training to your coaches and your club members that are suitable or require that training, haven't done it recently or haven't done it at all. But I'm conscious of time for the webinar, so we can take Q&As of that back and feed them back post webinar. But other than that, I'll hand over back to Viv.
Thanks, Chris. I'm really conscious that we said that this would be an hour and we are just approaching the hour now. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the cultural side of things, but we will include some information that we provide in the handouts for you. In a nutshell, I'm not sure who it was that first coined the phrase that culture eats strategy for breakfast, but it's an idea that I would absolutely endorse. If your club doesn't have a code of conduct, either their own or your own, or have adopted the RFU's code of conduct, then please have a look at that. We will provide some information for you. I think about 90% of clubs have, but that is the way that we can try to make sure that some of the safeguarding issues that we see through the season are tackled really early. It's not a safeguarding document, it's a whole club document, but it certainly helps safeguarding, club safeguarding officers and discipline secretaries, I would suggest, in terms of thinking around the behaviour that is or isn't okay. We are going to be doing some work in terms of promoting positive touchline behaviour. It's a really good time at the beginning of the season to have a think about what the ways in which your club help promote positive touchline behaviour. So that could be using respect barriers, it could be having technical areas, could be being really clear about people not coming onto the field of play. And if I've got any advice for you as a club, having senior members of your club who spend time in an age grade capacity, being able to kind of wander around and emphasize and support and promote good core values can be really positive. We often say that safeguarding is not, you know, one person with a fluorescent jacket and a clipboard wandering around, but actually having lots of people both in senior positions and others who are able to really support what it is that we would like to see in terms of thinking around not wanting shouty coaches, about thinking around not wanting parents who are, you know, shouting things that would indicate a win at all costs attitude rather than kind of that promotion of our core values. We often say in the safeguarding team that if our core values were shown week in, week out, day in, day out, you know, both from an RFU perspective and in a club perspective, that we might have less safeguarding cases to be able to manage. So really think about how core values are promoted within your club, not just for those that are on the pitch, but those that are surrounding it early. And just again to emphasise around seeking advice early, we are happy to be able to support you in relation to issues or concerns that you might have. Please make use of your CB safeguarding managers. and others within your CB for support. Their proactive work to support and enhance good practice is exactly what we're encouraging between CBs and clubs. You may also be contacted by your active partnership sport welfare officer, so those are new posts, and I know that lots of them are doing some work to really promote positive cultures and thinking around the support that they can provide across different sports actually, and again your CB safeguarding manager may pass on details to you around events that they might be holding or resources that they might be sharing. So in terms of next steps, please complete your audit if you haven't already. You will all be emailed following today with a link to this recording, a link to the questions, or a document in relation to the questions and answers from today. And also the recording will be on YouTube, and we'll make sure there's a Q&A link there as well for those of you that are perhaps watching this after the event. Please always know that you can contact the RFU safeguarding team directly, not only to discuss concerns or worries, but also to share ideas and thoughts that you might have to enhance best practice. And finally, thank you. It's great to have you here yet again, giving up your time to think about safeguarding, either because you've attended kind of live or that you're joining us and watching the recording. We really appreciate that the work that you do in your clubs and in your CBs. I know we've got several CB safeguarding managers on the call again today, so thank you. So thanks again from me and from the rest of the team. I'm sorry that the latter part of the webinar has been a little bit rushed, but we will get some more things out to you. And I know there have been lots of questions and suggestions to you in terms of other webinars that we might want to put on, so maybe a more dedicated space. So watch this space and we will be sure to do that. Thanks again.